Kudos to the writing team for trying to make Carlton a likable character after spending 4 episodes making him look like a crazy crackhead. Kudos. I'm on board. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead and leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. The 8th episode of Bel-Air is here. It's called No One Wins When the Family Feuds. It's a fitting title because there are a lot of feuds that are happening in this particular episode. I think what is fascinating about this series is seeing them take storylines that existed even in a small nugget or a small thread in the comedy show and kind of just expound upon it to make it a bigger drama. You have that with Lisa and Lisa's dad and him being a cop and how he doesn't like Will, and that just gets expounded upon, to now dealing with Lou, who was the father in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air comedy. Lou's name started to come back around as Will's dad here, and him sort of having the same characteristics of that version of the character makes me wonder if we're going to get one of those "why he don't love me" type of moments here, because that was a huge dramatic moment for the comedy. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays in the drama, because at some point the way that this episode ends, we're going to see Lou in some form. So in this episode, we start off with Uncle Phil and Carlton on the golf tee, kind of getting in some holes. And Carlton is on punishment a bit. Will is not, because his punishment is being sort of delayed because it's his 17th birthday, but Carlton is kind of getting his now for the party and the ramifications of that. And sort of what I said before in the previous episodes is that Uncle Phil is going to have to, while he may be doing his campaign correct, he's going to have to start answering for some of these things that his family is doing. You got Thirsty Chef, or Sexy Chef, and Hilliary online, and then you have Carlton and Will throwing parties and the cops sort of getting you out of it. Your wife really hasn't shown up for you on the campaign outside of the one charity event at the roller rink. So all of these things sort of start compiling upon each other, and Uncle Phil's in a bit of trouble with his campaign. Uncle Phil learns that he is not going to get the endorsement that he requires or wants on this golfing day, because there's too much muddiness in his house. He can't get his house in order. Until he gets his family in order, they can't really endorse him. And because he and Wiltz are both on the Democratic Party, they're sort of splitting the votes. And so one of them needs to go away for the other one to kind of get those votes and get the full backing. But it just shows you that, yeah, I knew all that stuff was going to come back to bite him in the butt. For Will's birthday, Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil fly in his mom. And his mom comes and is on this private jet, and Will and his mom just are in cloud nine. But what you can see is that Aunt Viv and his mom ain't really rocking together. There's some animosity there. They give each other's looks. They say mean barbs to each other consistently throughout the entire episode, to the point where you're like, yeah, these two got some things that they are eventually going to need to work out. We'll come back to that, because that sort of is the tie-in throughout the entire episode and what it is they go through and how it sort of helps to fix a little bit what Will and Carlton are going through overall. Hilliary is going through her own thing. She's torn. She's torn between whether or not she wants to do what's best for her and what she believes in, and versus what is actually going to make her some money. Is she going to do it for the money, the dollar? She has ideas of what she wants to do for her channel and her YouTube follow and her Instagram follows. Kylo, the head of the Instagram house, ain't really feeling none of that. It's like, no. What got you all of these hits and these endorsements is you being sexy chef. That's what you got to give them. And he's like, you got even more sexiness. And she's like, well, hold on. I'll do it. I know what I got to do. But let me talk to my parents first, because I gave them the impression that this is going to be a one-off. And it's clearly that I'm going to be continuing on doing this. And he's like, you got to get permission from your parents? But kind of, who the hell are you? But okay, fine, do whatever. But he can keep hitting that, like, this is what you have to do to sell. This is what you have to do to sell. If you don't, then I don't know what you're doing. And she tells Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv that she goes with this whole story about how women, I mentioned earlier, how black women don't ever get to be in control of sexuality, which she is not wrong about. She is, however, using this as a bridge to sort of shield herself and say, this is why I need to go ahead and do this, instead of just saying, like, I want to make money, and this is the only way that I can kind of do that in this. And I'm sort of I chose this path, so I'm now having to sort of fall in line and I've trapped myself into this sort of corner. They're not buying it. Uncle Phil's like, no, that sounds ridiculous. Take the stuff down, and they're like, wait. So are we now under the understanding that what we thought you were going to take it down, you are now going to do more of these videos? And she's like, yeah, that's the plan. Uncle Phil has already got in his head that he can't control his family. He's like this, and this, and this, and one of them was your sexy daughter online being naked, as he put it. Um, so he storms off because he's like, I got to go do some damage control and sort of turn the narrative on this. Viv stays and listens, and Hillary's like, don't you understand? Don't you get where I'm coming from? So I don't. I love you though. So this is what you feel you want to do or you need to do. Okay, I'll back you on it, but I definitely don't agree with this in this form. She gives her a bit of a nugget saying, in your soul, is this is this what you want to do? Is this who you are? Is this what you want to be represented at? And it sort of hits home for her because eventually she gets back to the influencer house, tries to make a video, and she is completely dressed for the sexiness, the sexy thigh, the sexy. She is completely dressed with her lingerie under her robe. She's ready to start filming, and she just gets second thoughts. She starts hearing the voice of her mom in her head, and she closes up her robe, and it's like, I can't do this. She goes, changes, and goes back to Kylo and tells him, like, yeah, I got 4 other ideas that I've come up with that I think you do stuff. And Kylo's like, nah, none of them are gonna work. Like, I knew this was gonna happen with you. I knew this is who you are. You don't stick with one thing. You jump when one thing seems too scared or too different or too out of the box for you. You run and go somewhere else, and you have the luxury of doing that because you never had to pay for a bill in your life. It's a rough way to kind of respond to a woman who is saying, I don't want to show my scattered ass on the net. He is trying to guilt her or coax her into it, and I'm glad that Hilliary stood up for herself. I'm like, nah, that's not what she said, fuck you, and that's not what she's going to do. And we learned that she told Kylo to go kick rocks. But in doing so, she has now breached her contract and owes him like 50 grand. He's now living in a hotel because she's not told her parents. But she has at least stood up for what she deemed is to be right. And the kudos to her. She also has a bit of a makeup moment at Will's birthday party with Jazz, she apologizes to Jazz, and Jazz sort of appreciates that she has stood up for herself and knows that she will figure out whatever it is she needs to figure out, but with her own morals and her own code sort of intact. We come around back to Will. Will is noticing some of the heat. He's been playing sort of the peacemaker throughout for both his mom and Aunt Viv. They have a lot of history that is problematic, if you will. They have a big family meeting with everybody. Carlton, Will, Uncle Phil, they all meet, and it's going well. All of the Banks kids love their aunt, and she loves them, and it's a lot of good memories until there isn't. And they both sisters hold a lot of resentment towards the other for different reasons, which we get into towards the back end. But there's just a lot of frustration. We then see that both two things sort of happen at once, which is weird because we don't really ever get mention of Will wanting to know more about his father beforehand. Anytime his father's kind of brought up earlier before this episode, it's kind of like, F that dude, I ain't got time for him. This is the first episode where we start seeing Will like, hey, do I look like him? Do I sound like him? Do I act like him? Which is something I think could have been placed, sprinkled in a little bit more, because it seems a little forced to go with the other story where the sisters are having a conversation saying, hey, I think I want to tell Will about his real dad, Leo. And it just seems too convenient for those two things to sort of meet up at once. But that's where we are. And there, Viv's like, no, you can't tell him. Uncle Phil's like, man, what the fuck? Is she crazy? She looking crazy? No, we're not doing that. They all have an immediate resentment about telling Will about his father and who he is. Uncle Phil's main thing was specifically on this day. Like, yeah, we can do it down the line, but I don't want this to be done on his birthday because I know who this Leo character is. And we come to find out that Leo was a drifter, was a person that never really stuck around, always was on the go, had fancy ideas, kind of like Will does every now and then. But when push came to shove, he just took off and left them high and dry. And Will's mom kept paying off debts and bills and everything that he had to whatever get rich quick scheme he had. She would pay it off until she finally had Will, had a kid, and then it was like, I can't do this anymore. He's not my focus, and he subsequently ran off. And a couple of things happen in this. Uncle Phil tells Jeffrey to keep an eye on Leo and to make sure that Leo's not a part of his life, and that just doesn't sit right with G. G's like, nah, he doesn't outright say I'm not doing it, but they're starting to have a sparring. They're having a sparring match where Uncle Phil's getting into shape and Jeffrey's being the spar partner. He's taking the hits, and he's like, I don't think. Shouldn't we leave that up to Will? Shouldn't we leave that? Because would you want Carlton to not know who you are? Would you not want to know Carlton? Same way with if I had a kid, I wouldn't want to know them. And Uncle Phil, for the first time ever, plays the hand of, mother, you work for me. I'm the boss. You do what the hell I say. And it never has come up before. They've always seemed like they were, while yes, he did work for him, they seemed like they were more of contemporaries than they were like, I'm putting you in your place. You know what? I told you to do something. You have to do it. I don't care if it doesn't sit right with you or not. So we get a sequence with him looking like, yeah, this ain't for me. Like this is the one thing I can do. I'll go kill a mother. You want me to knock some people off? I will take them off I'll take them off the board. But you want me to keep a father away from his kid, no matter how bad the father may do. They at least need to have that option. That doesn't sit right for him. So we have a moment where it looks like he's about to hand in his resignation. Like he has a letter that's like, I'm out. But he ends up putting it away because at the last sequence of this episode, Will comes in and asks G for help to find his dad. And she's all right, I'm going to do it. Much against everything that Phil has said. So this is the first time that we're getting to see him sort of buck against Uncle Phil and sort of help out the rest other members of the family. The rest of this episode is basically about Vi and Viv having a heart to heart. They have a huge blow up at Will's party, and it is learned that Vi always felt that she gave everything. She protected and provided for Viv. She felt like she was sort of responsible or had a part in her doing all her arts and all of this. She sacrificed things, and then all of a sudden she had to do everything by herself. She feels that she's not been given sort of the credit that is due to say all the things that she has sacrificed, and she feels like she's been erased. Once Aunt Viv got on and got big, she feels like they sort of erased her from their history or their life, and she doesn't want Aunt Viv to erase Will from her or her from Will. And that's sort of what the biggest blow up is. So they have to have a heart to heart. What's great about the heart to heart, it's really well written, is that they separate, after this huge blow up, they sort of separate and go to their separate corners. Carlton goes to talk to his mom, and Will goes to talk to his mom to sort of have you need to do better. Carlton lets her know, like, hey, once you take the anger out of it, can you understand how Vi might be hurt? And she's like, yeah, she's always sacrificed. When she took care of mom, she took care of this, she did this all on her own. Sometimes that gets to be a lot too much for some person to bear. And he's like, yeah, can you see it from her side? And he's like, when did you become so wise? Like, well, about the 100th time that you told me that I need to get along with Will. It's probably the most heartfelt moment that you've had with Carlton throughout this entire series. Will goes to talk to his mom, and he's like, hey, yeah, I need to stop all of this. And he kind of puts into her like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but I think you two need to just have a conversation, and they do. The two of them come together and talk. They decide, one, that they're going to do a better job of communicating with each other, and a better job of being around. But she's decided that Will should stay there, and that they're not going to divulge to her who Leo is to him or who his father is. So we'll see how that back end of Will asking G to get that information is going to kind of upend all of this. The only other real moment that happens in this episode is Will and Carlton sort of have a come together moment because of their seeing their moms feuding. They're like, we don't want to be the same way 10 years down the line where we can't even be in the same room without arguing with each other. And Will and Carlton sort of have a come together, and Carlton says the Lisa thing was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. It's not the impetus of everything that I'm angry about. I have to be perfect for my family. Like I'm third, but I have to do this bad. I have to be the best at lacrosse. I have to be the best at this to get any type of attention for this family or at school. You come in and you immediately are like the bee's knees. Everybody loves you. Like there's nothing you can do wrong. It's so much easier for you, and like that affected me. And then the Lisa thing just added on to it. And so they sort of have a moment where they're like, it was like, okay, I get it. I understand that somewhat. It doesn't quite click, but I can get where that's coming from for you. Where does that make us stand with Lisa? And Harold's like, Lisa's not into me. It's over. As long as you don't hurt Lisa, then I'm good with it, and I'll be okay. Which sort of leads to the point where I think that lie that he didn't tell Lisa about the real reason why he's out there is going to come out, and that's going to cause Lisa some friction, and Carlton's going to sneak back in there and swoop back in to sneak cover up the day. Like I feel like that's how that. Again, I said in previous episodes that Riverdale, Archie, Veronica, Betty thing that's going to happen here too. He's going to mess that up because he said, "I do you trust me? I do. Cool." And he's going to drop in that bomb of him not. And I feel like it's not going to come from Will or Carlton. It's going to come either from her dad, or some type of news outlet that sort of digs in a little deeper and gets into the mud of it. That's going to throw egg on his face in this situation, and then thus cause the two of them to sort of rife again. But I am at peace, and I am happy with Carlton now being likable. It does create for a better family dynamic. Ashley is still just kind of there, but it does create for a better family dynamic if they all sort of get along. But we do still have a couple of things that are outstanding. The Jeffrey finding Leo thing is probably going to be the Leo part of it is probably going to be the season finale of this. Since we're already at 8, we only have 2 more episodes left. I think that's going to be the season finale, that Leo comes and they kind of like, he's like, I'm going to go with my dad type of thing. Guys, I think in the episode, in the comedy episode, he wanted to go be a trucker. He was a trucker, and Will's like, I'm going to go spend the summer with my dad, going to do trucking. I think that's what's going to happen in this. So he's going to fall in love with his dad and be like, oh, cool, my dad's here, and I'm going to leave. And that's going to kind of upend all the family. Like, no, you can't go. So I feel like that's the best way to sort of probably end this season. I think that's what's going to end up happening. We still got to deal with Reed. Phil still seems to be quite jaded and shaded about whatever is happening with the being into painting again. It gets sort of sidetracked with the Leo conversation, but he's still not feeling that. And that's kind of how this one ends. Oh, wait, there is one more thing that happens, and I think that's pretty much going to be the impetus for the next episode. Is Uncle Phil and Wilkes, Lisa's dad, have a conversation off the record where they decide that they're going to have a debate, and whoever wins that debate will concede, and whoever loses that debate will concede and back the winner, and then thus all those votes can kind of go towards one person, and they agreed to that. So I think this next episode is going to be mostly the debate and some other B or C story, and then the final episode will be more about Will's dad coming into the picture. But again, another good episode. I'm enjoying this series. I'm really having a ball with Bel-Air. I love seeing how they take threads from previous parts of the series, the original series, and kind of stretch them out. I love that they've given Hilliary a lot more onus. I love that we're dealing with things as far as pressure that kids have to go through, no matter what ethnicity you are. And Hilliary bringing up the sexuality, but it not being what she wants to do. I do think women, black women specifically, should be able to do whatever the hell they want to with their bodies and be as sexual as women of other ethnicities. But that wasn't for Hilliary, and she made that choice, and that was good that they showed that she could kind of make that choice on her own. What did you guys think about this episode? Go leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours. Bye.